Welcome back to my testicular cancer story stage 2. In this video we're going to be looking at some of the methods used to prevent the cancer from returning, looking at mainstream and alternative methods, and also sort of looking at some of the problems we actually entailed along the way through the oncology department. So basically in my situation, stage 1 seminoma, I was presented with two options. The first one is the surveillance option. So this here entails a whole heap of CT scans, it's roughly about 10, and blood tests and appointments with your oncologist to track that you're not getting any relapses. The second option is to do chemotherapy. So in my case it's one shot of reasonably low acting carboplatin, and it's just administered over a couple of hours. As with anything, there's risk factors involved and you want to know the percentages. So roughly on average the chance of getting a relapse, if you do nothing about it and just keep checking it, is 20%, and if you go down the chemo route it reduces down to 5% roughly. So you'd think, oh, the chemo, that's a no-brainer, just get that done and move on. So the chemo as well also does come with surveillance. Now both the surveillance schedules are 5 years approximately, and the intervals at the start are spaced closer together and then they get further apart as the risk decreases further down the line. Now they worry with the surveillance option, especially again with the guy thing, that, you know, you might go for a couple of years doing the surveillance and think, oh, I'm fine, and then just sort of drop off the bandwagon, and then of course you could get a relapse later on. Now the chances of getting a relapse in the first year are higher than the second year and third year and so on. So you'd be pretty unlucky down the line, but it does happen. So you've got to appreciate, especially with the surveillance, there's actually a lot of time tied up from getting to and from the hospital, waiting around, there's probably reappointment, shuffling, actually getting these procedures done, which is a full CT, so you're not a full CT, it's a CT basically of your abdomen, pelvis and chest. So it's quite a large extent of the body, and you do have to have fluid put into you, so you've got to go on a drip. So yeah, then you've got to go back to your doctor's appointments after the results and get blood tests. So there's quite a bit of time. There's roughly about 10 of these or more through 5 years. So with the beauty with the going down the chemo route is that's sort of at least halved, so you've got less time doing all of that, so that's a good thing. Everyone's busy these days and they don't have time for that sort of stuff, but I see it as it's your health, so it's number one priority, and that's really what I've learned through this process is you've only got one shot at it. Well, we think we've only got one shot. So looking at it at this point, chemo just seems like a no-brainer. Nip the bud in the head, move on, done. The problem when you start looking at the chemo side of things, from this point on I started doing quite a lot of research online, but was really careful what I was reading and trying to filter out all the comments and whatnot, and tried to go straight into all the full medical articles and journals, all from reputable sources, and tried to look at it from the mainstream and the alternative view. It's hard to prove, but that the actual chemo might actually be giving you cancer down the line. It's a possibility. It's basically a poison that they're putting into you. Your body, it takes out so it takes out all of the bad cells or the cancer cells, which is good, but then it also takes out a lot of your good cells as well. So basically your immune system just takes a big hit and you're sitting right on the edge. So chemo was actually developed, I think it was in World War One. I could be wrong. It was one of the wars. for treating gas, soldiers that got gas inhalation, and they found it worked quite well for that. And then they also just randomly found out that it actually worked quite well for killing cancer cells as well. So from there forth, it's been the predominant way of curing cancer. But what I learnt with testicular cancer is the chemo is really responsive to it, and it's one of the better ones, if not the best. So now you think, okay, I'm not really cool with the chemo side of things. Surveillance is just like, it's obvious, just do that. So, but what I found the big issue with the surveillance route is all the number of CT scans you get which involve radiation. So with each scan that you have, you get exposed to a certain amount of radiation, and over your life it just adds up and adds up, it multiplies. So through general life you get about 2 MSVs, which is the unit for measuring it, and you're getting exposed to, depending on what sort of scan you do, end up having sort of around 40. And see, for the first year you're having 3 or 4 of them, so you're way up there with the radiation side of things. Now they know that radiation is bad because we've seen nuclear disasters around the world, and people unfortunately haven't fared very well through that environment. Now I know those levels are a lot higher, but there must be a level in there somewhere where it becomes detrimental to your health, and they're still trying to work out where that level is. But I just say if you can limit that as much as possible, is a good thing. And also, like, I could end up with high amounts of radiation in me, have a car crash, whatever, and end up needing a whole heap more CTs and blow me over the edge. You just don't know. I'm still reasonably young, and anything could happen down the line. So trying to mitigate that as much as possible, in my mind, seemed like a good thing to do. So at this point, after that first consultation, I sort of started forming a whole lot of questions, and being a bit of a technical person, I had some technical questions, and I wanted to know some of these numbers and whatnot. So actually I found it really hard to get the information out of the system over the phone. I just couldn't talk to the right people, they wouldn't give me answers. I found it really hard. So in hindsight, what I should have done there was just ask for a reappointment, or for another appointment, and got these questions answered that way. We also had a bit of an issue with the sperm banking side of things, so that they reckon with this dose of chemotherapy that the chances of ruining your reproductive system basically is very minimal, but it is possible. So we thought we might as well play it safe. It's government funded to do the extraction, to do the first setup, and then they'll pay for it each year as well if you don't have a kid. Now at this point we still don't have a kid living and breathing in this earth, so we'd get the funding, and then we could just cut it down the line, if we didn't need it. There's a good fail safe just in case. And we also found that a really hard process for whatever reason, just to get a signature on a piece of paper so we could go through that procedure. And you have to go through that procedure yourself personally. You have to own that. It doesn't happen with the system. So so we sort of, actually looking back on that first appointment, we did really struggle with the way it was handled. It felt like we were treated as a little wheel in the cog and sort of got spat out the other side, and it's just like, we just thought, hurry up, do the chemo and move on. I won't get into all the detail, but that's what it felt. And I got to the point where I couldn't get any answers, that I just felt, I just didn't have any trust in doing either option, and I thought, I don't want to do either. And I mean, that is another option, but I was pretty keen to do one of these options, and I felt really deflated. Actually, it was really hard, and I just didn't know what to do. I could not. I sat there one day and driving home, and I was like, I can't do either of these options at the moment. I don't feel right about it. So what I ended up doing was doing the old Google. Cancer Society New Zealand popped up, gave them a ring. There are a whole bunch of like registered nurses in this field, so they know what's happening, and they were really good to talk to. They're like, have you tried this? You could do that, all these things. Here's the nurse for this region. She knows all the people, and had a good chat to a couple, 2 or 3 of their nurses, and they really helped. So basically what they recommended to do is what we did do, is go and see our GP, explained the situation. He was in total agreement with what we were saying, and got a referral to see another oncologist. This meant actually driving down to Palmerston, which is a couple hours away, which we were fine with. We wanted to get this, we wanted to get this nailed. So what I learnt through that is, you don't have to just sit there and take it and do what they tell you. You have actually got a lot of options. It's really good in New Zealand. You don't have to say yes to everything. You can choose to say no, and you can find other options. There might be a bit of resistance and stuff, but and like, we didn't want to be dicks about it and shake the boat too much, but we didn't feel right, and it's cancer, it's massive, it's not just a little cold. So it was really good we did that, and going to Palmy and seeing another specialist there, I just straight away clicked with him a lot better as well. There was a personal thing sort of going on, and he just seemed to have more time to answer the questions and was a lot more thorough, and just put our minds to ease again, So in that he sort of went over all the information again, and it all made sense, and we actually agreed that, what I was saying, that the amount of radiation across the world is actually trending down, so that, i.e. the CT scans they're doing fewer and fewer of them, and still getting similar results out the end. They're not missing too many people because of these reducing scans. So I sort of presented this to the specialist, and he to be fair, he wasn't like, he would rather do the schedule that they've worked out, because and there's sort of no fallback on themselves and stuff, but he was pretty open to me knowing that I've got maybe an increased risk, but going with doing less CT scans through the whole thing, which made me feel a lot more comfortable. So at the end of that appointment, we just decided that it was we'll just end up going with the chemo route, and he said that's where most people actually do go. That's the more popular choice, even though the surveillance is a totally valid option. And to be honest, it was the hardest decision I've ever had to make. Like, it was so tough. It was a 50-50 for me. You've just got to know that at the end of the day, you've just done the right thing for yourself and everyone else as well. Lauren, she felt really relieved and stuff, that, bit of mucking around and toing and froing, but we finally got there. I did, and by this stage, we're sort of getting, 3 months down the track, the time we booked the chemo in. It was getting on the later side of things. So as I say, this is that's the mainstream way to go. And I thought it's really worth looking at alternative things that you can do to help yourself. So basically, to get above that average, so that 20% or 5%, let's make that 10% and 2%, which I think, from what I've read and watched, you can definitely do by looking after yourself. So it's a whole combination of diet, eating real clean food, exercise, sleep, chilling out. Like, I might have been guilty of that, just doing too much stuff and not relaxing enough. Like, you don't want any stress in your life. If you're going to get it, but try to avoid it. And that big one, as I've talked about, is that positive mental attitude. Like, your body's quite funny. You start sending negative thoughts through it. It does start shutting down. So if you can be positive through the whole thing, that's probably the first massive step. And now one thing I did do, which I probably should have done years ago to be honest, because it's been really good, is go and see a naturopath/nutritionist. So they work a little bit differently to say going to see your doctor, who kind of, what's wrong with you? Okay, probably most of the time they might give you some drugs or something to, alleviate the pain and get yourself better and move on. The nutritionist, they do testing, so they test your bloods. They actually hook you up to a machine and it sends a little electric pulses for anything that doesn't hurt or anything, and they figure out like your muscle max, how hydrated you are, your oxygen levels, like just like that. It's amazing. It's all on a bit of paper, all the numbers, graphs, everything's all right there to see. And then they get you to do a food plan. So they basically correlate all this information and just see where you're lacking and what you could do better. So one of the things for me, well, a few things, but one of the things is I could put on actually some more muscle mass. I'm quite lean. Another thing, vitamin B12. How would you know you're deficient in that? You'd have no idea. You go to the vitamin store. I've never been taking, for a long time I haven't taken anything and tried to get all the vitamins and minerals out of eating well. But yeah, you're just if you're going on vitamins, it's awesome, but you don't really know what you're deficient in. So what's the point of having them when you don't know which ones you actually need? You might be just flushing them straight through. It might be a waste of time. So I've sort of seen that, this, I don't know, it makes sense to me. There's the numbers, have that and this, and we'll monitor that and see where you're at the following month. Okay, you might not need so much of that now. We've got you up to a good level. So also through trying to make my decision about which way to go, I talked to a lot of medical professionals, as many as I could, and asked them what they would do in my situation. One that stood out was a more alternative GP in Christchurch, who I'd actually seen down there from a recommendation from some friends, and he'd actually been through cancer and had tumours in his brain, and he didn't have a very good time of it, but he basically recommended, he went down the natural route, then did the chemo, and he got there, and he's really that way inclined about getting your body right naturally, and he basically said, the chemo for this one, you're fit, you're strong, you'll fight it and you'll flush it out. It did help just having a bit of time and thinking about it. You don't need to make, they honestly in that first appointment want you to make a decision like this. They're like, right, what are you doing? We're going to book in chemo. You can cancel it, but kind of you're doing it. And it's that's what it felt like. And it was actually, I'm going to go home and think about this. And then you've got all these questions, and it's actually, no, cancel that, because, I've got to process this. You've actually got time. So take time and suss it out. So at the end of the day, I made a decision to go with the chemo, and I felt absolutely fine and happy with it, and really positive. So as I say, if you haven't seen the previous video to this, have a look, and then I'm going to do one after this relating to the chemo. So stay tuned and look out for that one. See ya.